Attorney General Pam Bondi appeared before the Senate Judiciary Committee. This was not a routine oversight hearing. It was the annual Justice Oversight Committee meeting, but the timing changed everything. And what Bondi said there would cause much more trouble than what he didn't say. Bondi started the hearing with these words: "The two-tier justice system is over." But the documents that emerged today show the exact opposite. The two-tier justice system has not ended. It has taken on a new form, and Bondi himself stands at the center of this new system. The irony is that the person who said the two-tier justice system is over has now become the biggest symbol of that system. Bondi's statements today caused a seismic impact in the legal community because Bondi admitted something, not just controversial, but illegal. And this confession could end his career, perhaps the end of his freedom. First, let's understand the background. Why is this hearing so critical? The trial took place just a few days after former FBI Director James Comey was indicted by a federal grand jury. This timing is not a coincidence. Democratic senators claim that the Justice Department was weaponized to target the president's political enemies. The Comey indictment bolstered those claims, because Comey was one of the president's most well-known critics. CBS News correspondent Chanel Call followed the hearing and summarized the situation as follows. Some Democratic lawmakers are now accusing the Justice Department of pursuing people perceived as enemies of President Donald Trump. Senators grilled Bondi on a number of issues: how the Epstein files were handled, the existence of that infamous client list, hiring of January 6 defendants by the Department of Justice, deployment of National Guard units to American cities. Each topic is serious. Each topic is a separate debate. A heated exchange occurred between Illinois Democratic Senator Dick Durbin and Bondi over the deployment of the National Guard. Durbin claimed that the deployments were pushing constitutional limits, but none were as damning as Bondi's original confession. According to court documents dated November 10, 2025, and reported in detail by Law and Crime, Bondi authorized a prosecutor to handle politically sensitive cases. These cases targeted the president's political opponents. The issue is this: this prosecutor was not properly appointed under the United States Constitution. The appointment clause is clear and unambiguous. Certain federal officials should be appointed through specific processes involving presidential nomination and Senate confirmation. Or, clearly defined alternatives should be used for lower-level officials. These requirements are not optional. It exists precisely to prevent the kind of unchecked power that Bondi's actions represent. The Founding Fathers did not include this provision for nothing. This rule has been in effect for over 200 years. What happened when this flaw emerged? The indictments faced the risk of collapsing in court. All the cases could have been invalidated. Months of work could have gone to waste. And what did Bondi do? Instead of acknowledging the constitutional violation and correcting it through legal means, he tried to retroactively resolve the issue. He signed the documents later, and he backdated the documents to create the impression that the prosecutor had been properly appointed from the very beginning. In other words, he manipulated the documents. This is not a technical error, not a clerical error. This is an attempt to rewrite history to cover up a constitutional violation. Do you think this can be dismissed as an administrative error? Or is it a deliberate cover-up? Share your thoughts in the comments. Here's the point that makes the situation even worse. And this point is very critical. The Department of Justice itself acknowledged the issue. In court filings opposing Bondi's position, DOJ attorneys explicitly stated, the attempt to retroactively validate the appointment was unauthorized. Unauthorized. This word is very important. You need to understand the legal weight of this word. The lawyers of her own department describe her own attorney general's actions as unauthorized. This shows that the government acknowledges the constitutional flaw and that Bondi acted anyway. This acknowledgement transforms the situation from negligence to intent. Intent. This is the difference between an administrative error and criminal liability. and this difference could determine whether Bondi will spend the rest of his life behind bars. Bondi is no novice. Lawyer, former Florida State Attorney General, someone who has been a prosecutor for years. He understands constitutional law. He understands the appointment clause. Despite this information, the decision to proceed exposes him to the most serious federal charges that could be considered. Legal experts describe this situation as unique, because normally such violations are committed by lower-level bureaucrats and go unnoticed. But here, the country's highest legal authority appears to have knowingly and willingly violated the Constitution. So, what charges could come up? Legal experts are considering several possibilities. First, obstruction of justice. Backdating documents to conceal constitutional defects during active legal proceedings fully fits the definition of corruptly obstructing the administration of justice. The law does not require dramatic gestures or open threats. Document manipulation designed to conceal illegal behavior is more than sufficient. Obstruction of justice alone can carry up to 20 years in prison per count, and there can be multiple counts. Each manipulated document could be counted separately. Secondly, abuse of office. Using the power of the Attorney General's office to conduct politically motivated prosecutions while knowingly violating constitutional protections constitutes official oppression. Federal courts take this charge very seriously. They take it even more seriously, especially when it comes to high-ranking officials. Third, conspiracy to deprive constitutional rights under color of law. Federal law defines it as a crime for government officials to knowingly violate constitutional protections while acting in their official capacity. If Bondi coordinated with others to advance these prosecutions, despite knowing they were unconstitutional, this law comes directly into play. Each of these charges carries a serious prison sentence. When multiple numbers are added consecutively, the math becomes inevitable. The number of 5 justice blockages, when combined with multiple civil rights violations, easily pushes the total penalty exposure into the life imprisonment range. Do you know what one of the most significant aggravating factors recognized under federal guidelines is? Abuse of a position of trust. As Attorney General, Bondi was the highest law enforcement officer in the country, head of the justice system, the person responsible for upholding the Constitution. This does not protect him. On the contrary, it makes his behavior more blameworthy. Judges definitely take this factor into account when imposing a sentence, and this factor can significantly increase the sentence. There is also the issue of exposure at the state level. Some alleged behaviors, including the falsification of official documents, may violate state laws, and state charges cannot be wiped away by a presidential pardon. This is a very critical point. Even if there is a federal pardon, state charges continue. Even if federal charges are somehow politically neutralized, state prosecutors remain free to pursue their own cases. That's why legal analysts describe Bondi's position as uniquely perilous. The escape route is very limited. It is important for these developments to reach a wider audience. If you also think these topics should be followed, subscribe to the channel and like the video. Politically, Bondi has been a controversial figure from the very beginning. Democratic lawmakers have long accused him of bending the Justice Department to serve the president's interests, selectively targeting critics while protecting allies. Until now, these accusations mostly lived in the realm of politics. Difficult to prove allegations. It was just words. Democrats would make a claim, Republicans would deny it. What changed everything? The emergence of documented constitutional violations supported by his own confessions. There are now documents, there are dates, there are signatures, and most importantly, there is the statement of DOJ's own lawyers, saying, unauthorized. This shift explains the growing bipartisan outrage. Even conservative constitutional experts, who generally support broad executive power, have publicly stated that Bondi has crossed a line. This is an important signal. Normally, those who defend the executive power are now distancing themselves. When the advocates of the executive power refuse to defend the executive, the seriousness of the situation is evident. Court records do not care about party loyalty. It preserves the truth permanently. Bondi's confessions now exist as part of the official record. The prosecutors don't need to speculate. They can only point to their own words and actions. There are several paths before the prosecutors. Each has its own unique risks and consequences. They might avoid making accusations by citing political sensitivities as an excuse. But given the strength of the evidence, this is becoming increasingly difficult. Public pressure is increasing. They might bring charges and offer a plea deal in exchange for cooperation. This could be the most likely scenario. Or they could ask for a full indictment and leave the decision to the jury. This is the riskiest scenario. If a plea deal is offered, it will likely require Bondi to testify against others. The pressure to cooperate will be immense. Life imprisonment is a strong source of motivation. Cooperation can mean the difference between decades behind bars and a reduced sentence. If he chooses to fight, the risks multiply. Juries tend to respond harshly to government officials who abuse their power. Judges are inclined to impose harsher sentences post-trial than they were after negotiated plea deals. The stakes are high. Do you think Bondi will fight or seek a deal? Share your predictions in the comments. There are broader implications from a legal rule perspective as well. This case will affect not only Bondi, but the entire system. Prosecuting a former or current attorney general for constitutional violations sends a clear message that no office grants immunity. It reinforces the idea that the Constitution is not optional, even for those tasked with enforcing it. This principle is one of the cornerstones of democracy. At the same time, political repercussions become explosive. Supporters frame the prosecution as persecution. Critics frame the inaction as complicity. This tension guarantees that it will reshape public trust in the justice system, regardless of what happens next. One thing is already clear. Pam Bondi put herself in this position with her own actions. No one forced her. It was his own decision. The attempt to retroactively legitimize unconstitutional prosecutions turned political debate into criminal exposure. There are documents. Confessions are on record. The results are no longer hypothetical. Court records are public. DOJ's own lawyers said, unauthorized. And up to 20 years in prison is on the table. This number can be multiplied with more than one figure. The possibility of life imprisonment is real. This story is still developing. Prosecutors are examining the evidence. Legal teams are weighing the risks. The decisions made in the coming months will determine whether this will end with a cautionary tale or a historic prosecution.